Now, after nearing what would be a historic milestone of $100,000, Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency, continues to retreat. Now, is the rally prompted by Donald Trump's election victory losing steam? Let's get insights into this from the founder and CEO of global Miranda Miner Group, Arlone Abello, who joins us now on the show via Zoom. He is the founding chairman also of the innovative movement of the Philippine Association of Crypto Traders, or IMPACT. Hi, Arlone. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Mikey, for having me here. Thank you, Billionario.
Okay, so Arlo, talk to us about Bitcoin's rally. Is it losing steam?
You know what? I don't think so. In fact, the intraday retracements we're seeing from 100,000, almost near that neighborhood, down to 91,000. We saw profit taking from institutions and retailers who entered within the $74,000 previous all-time high breakout, and we also saw a correlation of Bitcoin from a price perspective after Trump himself made his trade policies and pronouncements, particularly when we saw that he pronounced tariffs to be given to Canada, to Mexico, and China. We saw a correlated move on Bitcoin retracing. So in both occasions, we saw that obviously pronouncements of the president-elect and also profit-taking, and another thing is the technical support breakdown from a technical analysis, are the ones who's actually driving a little bit of retracements at this point. However, we believe that we're just obviously in the middle of the bull run, and this is not yet the end, Mikey, on a big picture.
Arlen, what do you think it would take for Bitcoin to break past the $100,000 mark per token? Following this Trump fever, what do we need? Perhaps I'm thinking regulatory clarity to know, once there's more information, the possibilities become expand a little bit more. What's your take on the situation?
It's a very good question because we're coming from a year, 2022, 2023, we're governed by the macroeconomics, with high inflation, obviously equities, and Bitcoin saw a correlated dive, from a price perspective. So 2024, Bitcoin is coming to an era of regulatory clarity. I say it because way back July of this year, when Trump gave his campaign speech, and he gave a lot of promises, 6 of which, number one, he's going to use Bitcoin as a national reserve in the U.S. To the tune of almost $4 billion. And it's obviously creating that hype from institutions and from an adoption perspective. Therefore, we see that if he's going to fulfill his promises, number one, Bitcoin as a national reserve. Number two, he's going to fire one of the famous proponents of Bitcoin from a regulatory perspective, in this case, SEC Chair Gary Gensler. He said he's going to fire him. So if he's going to fulfill those 6 promises within the next 100 days, then we can potentially see the market growing their appetite further. Adoption is going to be, even bigger, and we could see ourselves 100K above anytime next year.
Yeah, with the U.S. taking a leadership role in this space, it's interesting to see how the rest of the world is going to follow, particularly with the U.S., the big possibility of the U.S. using Bitcoin in their own reserves. How do you think the role of Bitcoin will evolve in global financial systems?
We have seen countries already use Bitcoin as a legal tender. Near shore, we have El Salvador, obviously in other countries. We have seen, at least within the Hong Kong, we have authorized several registered trading platforms to be able to allow buying and selling of Bitcoin. I would say one of the biggest tick for us, or a check mark that needs to happen, is when China starts to unban Bitcoin. If you recall, 2021, China officially banned Bitcoin. It was the reason why Bitcoin went a nosedive from $64,000 down to $25,000, because they said, we're going to be banning Bitcoin altogether. But if they start to open, and so the dynamics here is obviously there's a political play between whether China is going to unban Bitcoin just because Trump policy is going to use Bitcoin as a national reserve. If they obviously try to open the market again for Bitcoin, then we're going to be seeing a lot of folks within the East Asia and Asian region to start buying Bitcoin. And that's going to be one of the biggest drivers why Bitcoin can potentially further grow up.
Interesting. Bitcoin as a key asset in investment portfolios. In the United States, most of the people that hold Bitcoin are from America. Can you give us an idea of the numbers about how much percent of the people that hold the token are from the U.S. vis-a-vis from elsewhere in the world?
So at an average, north of 60% of the traders are from the U.S. Let's talk about some of the statistics. So number one, from an institution perspective, when the SEC in the U.S. approved the spot Bitcoin ETF January 11 of this year, we saw that the market capitalization of Bitcoin from institutions have grown from zero to almost $110 billion as we speak, just in 11 months, Mikey. So we're seeing growth from a perspective of adoption led by BlackRock, and we continue to see, and we're seeing that financial advisors will be recommending to their clients to start including Bitcoin in their portfolio, especially for the baby boomers and the early Gen Xers. So we're going to be seeing some of those to include, obviously, because it's going to be fueled by regulatory clarity in the U.S.
Well, interest in Bitcoin is high. The pace of the appetite for Bitcoin varies across the region. Can you talk to us about the demand for Bitcoin from both institutional and retail investors? How does that compare from the U.S. To the Philippines?
There's this one thing we're all waiting from our organization. We're waiting for this very important bill that was vetoed by Biden when obviously in his administration, the Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. This was a bill that was passed both from the Senate and the Congress in the U.S. and unfortunately it was vetoed by Biden. And this bill obviously allows everyone in the U.S., all of the banks in the U.S. to have custody of Bitcoin. So when this happens, we're obviously seeing banks adopting to Bitcoin. And just imagine this, Mikey, if you see our banks, in the malls or wherever it is, you see them having custody of Bitcoin, it would obviously build more trust and confidence to the asset itself. So from a difference perspective, we're seeing, slow adoption from an institution perspective. Obviously, it was one of those stigma that they say, we don't want to put our hands there just because there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. But from a retail perspective, it's where you see individuals, whales we call them, obviously adding to their portfolio. One of that is Michael Saylor, who's obviously a very much proponent of Bitcoin, who recently pronounced they're going to be selling some convertible notes to be able to buy billions of dollars of Bitcoin again.
Of course, it's the whales that are getting on this because of the high price barrier, but because of fractional ownership, a lot more are going to be able to, or a lot more can take part in this in Bitcoin's bull run, and perhaps, as the token rises, the price of the token rises further down the line. I wanted to ask you, what should investors consider before buying into Bitcoin, even if it's just fractional ownership?
That's a very good question. So we always say in our community, number one, you need to understand what's the use case of Bitcoin. You need to understand what wallets are, because not your keys, not your coins. You cannot have Bitcoins if you don't understand how to have a custody of Bitcoin itself. Number two, we say to our communities, you don't buy Bitcoin if you're not insured, you have no emergency funds, etc. So this is sort of a speculative asset. Vis-a-vis, you could compare this to equities at this point. Obviously, you don't want to buy these high volatility asset if you're not really insured, you have no emergency funds. So we want to build that first from a fundamentals perspective before we even go to Bitcoin. The way we look at it, I would say Bitcoin is starting to gain regulatory acceptance, which means that we're on our way to have banks, institutions, capital investment companies to start advocating for Bitcoin, to make it part of their portfolio. What we're hearing is that an average of 5% of their portfolio is starting to be open for Bitcoin at this point. So we don't want to obviously mirror that at this point. We have our own different risk appetites, but that's at least what we're seeing from an industry perspective. Thank you.
Now, one last question before I let you go. We are just out of time. Assuming the regulatory environment in the U.S., it goes the way Bitcoin traders want it to go, cryptocurrency traders want it to go. What's your outlook for Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, under a favorable regulatory environment in the United States?
So I said this October of last year when Bitcoin was 35,000. I said it could be at around 74. I was interviewed July of this year. I said End of year, it's going to be 100. So everyone's waiting for my potential next step here. I would say we could potentially see 150, but it's going to be dependent on, to your point, Mikey, pending better and favorable conditions. If Trump considers fulfilling all of his promises, and potentially, he did not say this is a promise, but who's stopping him to say, you know what, let's put Bitcoin as a national tender? It's going to be one of the things we're going to be looking forward to.
All right, again, that's 150,000 US dollars per token. That's an outlook, assuming the regulatory environment goes the way cryptocurrency traders want it to. All right, thank you, Arlone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Arlone Abello, founder and CEO of global Miranda Miner Group.